right, welcome guys. So again, I'm joined by my colleagues, John Miller, Dan Leahy. I'm Dwayne Stroman. We are going to debate a topic that has some contention, has some discovery to be done. Had a bit of what I thought was an epiphany this weekend on a motorcycle ride. And my thought was, in theory, there's no such thing as variability. There's only lack of information, lack of computation of the outcomes, the angles. And if we think about from manufacturing, we do an awful lot to minimize and limit variability, reduce tolerances, increase built-in quality so that we know for fact what product we're going to deliver. But if you think about a product launch, let's think back to the Rubik's Cube. There's a really good video that an author put out about talking about the difference between complicated and complexity. And he used the example of the Rubik's Cube. And he said the Rubik's Cube is an example of complexity where the variables could not be calculated and you could not have known the outcome. I disagree. If you had enough data, enough information, enough computational ability, which we're getting closer and closer to every day, you could have actually predicted the success of the Rubik's Cube. Now, here's my premise, and I know this is where I want John to be able to jump in because he disagrees, but I think it's just us aligning. From my perspective, it's a trade-off. Variability exists because we're not willing to pay the cost to eliminate it. And in most cases, it's not worth eliminating. The positive outcome by consuming and using variability and saying it's okay that we don't know all of that, it's not worth the intense effort to find all of that, because much quicker over here, we can learn what the right outcome is needed by using variability, by innovating, by using set-based design, by trying different approaches. We can very quickly, much faster, get to what we actually need to deliver, what the customer needs, rather than doing that deep dive to eliminate all variability. And that's what I think a lot of companies struggle with, where the requirements comes from. We're trying to, as close as possible, eliminate variability when it's actually an ally. It's something we should be using.
Dwayne, are you referring really to the concepts around doing a big upfront design to before taking it's the uh, ready aim fire approach instead of ready fire aim?
It's the entire product conception. So I'm thinking even more from product viability, feasibility.
Sure.
Is this the right product for the market? Is the right solution for the customer situation? That type of thing. If we had the ability to gather all of the data, all of the tolerances, if you will, and we had the computational ability, we could actually predict what will work in the market. I mean, Facebook, a number of the social media platforms, marketing concepts, they're getting a lot closer to that every day, being able to predict customer behavior. Not perfect, but they're getting much closer every day. My point being, you get to a certain point of looking at data, looking at marketing, getting a general direction, an idea, and it is much more cost effective and feasible to use innovation, to use set-based design to discover the right outcome rather than doing all the deep dive to actually predict the right outcome.
Because truly is are those outcomes even knowable? You know, we talk a lot about how digital product development is a discovery and learning process, um, and we're building new art all the time. You know, using the same tools and techniques that our teams have been using for years, but that specific solution, that specific solution alternative to solve the problem at hand, um, unless we're rewriting something we've already done, it literally is we're discovering a better way to solve that problem than had been developed before.
So Dan, this is where the concept I think is important. I was talking with our mutual friend Rob yesterday, and I told him my theory. He said, "You're not crazy," but he said, "Have you thought about the third body problem?" So what's that? And he described the science fiction movie based on a book about these three planets that were essentially tourist destinations, and everything was peaceful, paradise, all of that. But every once in a while, chaos would ensue. They might get too close or gravitational or something like that, and all kinds of crazy things would go haywire. What I'm saying is, theoretically, we could get to the point we could absolutely predict those chaotic moments, what appears to be chaos. Well, what I'm saying is we need to be okay with the fact that we don't know all of that, that we don't need to gather all of that, that it's actually much more successful and positive to have a baseline understanding what we're trying to accomplish and be okay with the trade-off of no, we don't know the exact outcome. That would take way too long, but it is possible, but it would take way too long. And we may not have the computational data ability to actually do that. Instead, let's move to assuming variability, preserving options. Let's be okay. And it's a conscious decision that we say we could potentially actually know the outcome, predict it. But why? It's not worth it. Let's move over to here where we can much, much more quickly come up with what the right outcome should be.
And I got to jump in with that. And to me, really important. When people start using the word taking variability out, so many times we go back to they're coming from a manufacturing line or assembly line mentality, which is fine. And in that case, you do want to remove variability because you've got tolerances at that point. And Dwayne, you just brought up the actual wording from the safe principle, which goes back to lean. And this is my point of earlier is in the engineering development, the development of the ideas that we're going to build, we want to allow variability in all its glorious forms because that's where a company makes its value, the difference between one company's solution versus another. So, and Dwayne, you were using the motorcycle earlier. Think of the difference if you had a diameter of X on the pistons that you've got in your front fork. And then you've got another company that says, well, we don't like that design. We're going to go to twice that size in order to do this to it. That second company used that variability in a different way. They came up with a totally different solution. One is going to be best in the marketplace. We don't know which one. But if we take all variability out of the engineering portion of lean product development, truly getting to the point where we have those specifications of what we're going to build, all products would look exactly alike.
I agree with that. Here's the point. As we get closer to true digital twins, true replication of outcomes, the scenario-based planning that, more complex systems now can actually work through, but then you have to add in the fact that those computational systems have variability themselves. They're not perfect. And so what I'm saying is recognize the fact that it is theoretically possible to really close to eliminate and possibly completely eliminate variability. It's not worth it. It's not the right approach. John, I don't disagree with your premise that if we got to that point, every product would look the same. There would be no differentiation in the marketplace. You're right, because we would have had this successful way of finding the ultimate perfect solution. But then we have to bring to the fact, but every customer is different. That's more variability. If we were able to incorporate that into our calculations, we still would have the perfect product. The reality is it's not worth it. We have to let go of that. And I'm advocating that you make a conscious choice to do that. I'm okay with that. I know we could dive deeper here, but the time it would take and the data that we might miss and the incorrect assumptions we might put into that because we're still fallible is not worth it. We're much better to innovate and learn quickly over here using set-based design, assuming that variability. That's what I'm trying to say.
Even more than that, Dwayne, if we, I think we can look at the mindsets involved in those two paradigms. If we're still even suggesting that there is a best alternative, solution alternative, and so the struggle really is to strive for perfect before we begin, then are we not crushing that experimental mind, that curious experimental mindset that we're trying to grow, that will through experimentation, discover with evidence better and better and better solution alternatives that isn't just going to pay one dividend. That continuing evolution towards better will give dividends far beyond that initial effort.
Right. And again, I want to be clear on what I'm advocating for. Let's understand that theoretically the possibility is there. And now we make a conscious choice, which now makes us much more comfortable, okay with variability. That's really what the bottom line I'm striving for is, let's get comfortable with variability. Let's not even get comfortable. Let's be best friends with it. Embrace it. Absolutely. Because once we do that and we back away from, I have to know every detail of this project. Okay, theoretically, I'm saying that is possible. Realistically, feasibly, not a chance. So just understand that and be okay with variability. And then again, you get to the part of where you're embracing, because you start to realize when we set enough direction to get started, we set those minimal constraints needed, and we start learning, we get to a viable, near perfect, better solution much more quickly, much more accurately. That's one thing I keep advocating people to understand about the SAFE framework. It's not just about time to market. In fact, we always say, if you put the wrong solution faster in the market, customers just turn away sooner. This is about getting the right solution out there first. Accuracy is far more important than speed. And advocating for being okay with variability, saying, yep, that we're going to embrace it and we're going to learn from it, you're going to get to that accurate solution much faster.
And as you're arguing that, and you keep going back to, the SAFE principle 3, but let's be honest, that's coming from those principles of product development flow from Reinertsen, but
Yeah.
it's not just there. Now we're getting into just bottom line. We are talking set-based design, and that's variability. Don't assume a point solution.
Right.
That's lean. Set-based design says, and shoot, even, oh gosh, lost his name, the requirements guru of years past. He said, look, if you don't understand three options, three alternatives for your problem, you probably don't understand the problem well enough if you're not starting with at least three. And this is where variability to me really comes into play, is these different solutions are the ones that allow a company to increase essentially their profit, because they're choosing the one that makes the most sense for their market, for their engineering and everything else. And so there's a maximization going on in the background that I don't think people take advantage of, assume variability and preserve options. I don't think they
don't.
understand the power of that idea.
So a question to both of you: who is it?
Weinberg. There we go. Weinberg.
Weinberg.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Jerry Weinberg. Sorry.
No, that's great. In your experience, who is it that's uncomfortable with that uncertain, with that level of uncertainty?
Oh, I think it's leadership. I think it's business leadership. And I think there's a reason why. And again, this is pulling on the empathy. I think back to my software engineering days, even as progressive as the companies I worked for were at the time, that they really embraced variability. They understood it fairly well. I don't know that we ever used the word, but we embraced that there are multiple possibilities. But in most organizations, business will say, I need this done by X. And teams having no other choice will say, okay, we will have that done by X. And they don't. They either have a shadow of what's needed or they're late delivering. And so business has become gun shy. And so rather than stepping back and trying a different approach, it's very similar. I keep using an analogy. It's the person that was on the shipwreck hanging on to the piece of driftwood, and there's a lifeboat going right by them, but they won't let go of the driftwood. They grip it even tighter. It's kind of the analogy too of, if you're trying to collect more water in your hand, squeezing your hand closed is not the option. That's not the approach, but it's the only approach they know. If we only have one trick, I'm just going to double down on it. So they enforce even more. I need requirements. I need you to stick to these. I need a project plan. I need this. And again, tons of empathy because I have to be honest, us in software engineering have created that paradigm. We've committed to those things that we knew couldn't be done, and then we weren't visible and transparent as we were delivering to let them know we need to adjust, we need to course correct. So we do the typical 6-month project, get to the end, and oh, that's not what I wanted, and it's disappointment. What other option do they have?
Well,
John?
yeah, so really, really important. And now again, as we're going through this path using the word variability as a basis for this discussion, I think we're at kind of this inflection point because you were just talking about the requirements of design and the project plan, so to speak, which we're not supposed to have in Agile. We know a lot of folks still do it. But from that engineering side, we go back to, we know from a product development perspective, especially when we're doing lean product development, product goes that way, knowledge comes back. And we know there are some companies who get the knowledge coming back. Everybody writes about the Toyota production system that those engineers that are working on, just as one, for instance, and this, this example gets brought up in Ward and Sobek's book, product development, or no, not lean product and process development. They talk about how when Toyota builds a new car, they identify the chassis and the engine, but then they're considering 4 to 5 transmissions and 10 to 20 exhaust systems and all these options. The thing is most people think those options are coming from that team at that point in time, and they're not. It's the knowledge flowing back from all of their development efforts, and most organizations don't have a good way to keep those options visible.
Yeah.
And that comes out in Dontar's book, The Lean Machine, because he talks about, there's an example in there that always sits with me forever. There was a development effort going on in Milwaukee, and in order to do this, they had to figure out the how much energy was in gasoline at certain points of 30% gas versus 70% ethanol in other places. And the right person happened to be in the room at the time. And they said, oh, there's some folks down in Brazil that did that study. Go look for it. And the folks in Brazil actually had it from 0 100 all the way to 100 0. And the folks in Milwaukee could use that, but it was just because somebody in the room knew that extensive testing had been done. So otherwise, it would have been lost. So
John,
knowledge is lost.
You've pivoted it to how do we embrace variability? One of the key things that organizations will be really successful with variability is knowledge acquisition, gathering knowledge, and as you said, making it visible, because we can much more quickly not only truncate unsuccessful paths, but take that data and add it to the learning, but we'll have better starting paths to begin with because of that shared data, that shared approach. For example, you said, well, what if we did this with the fuel? Well, that's a really good idea. If they hadn't even thought of that option in the first place, the data would be worthless. But the fact that they were open to those innovative ideas and could even think of that, now the knowledge acquisition in the organization can say, hey, I think we already have some information on that. We can get to that even faster. And we talk about building a learning organization. So we've been talking about what should you be thinking? This is a bit of how do you get that moving there? Knowledge is a big part of it, gathering it and making it visible and accessible.
You know, Dwayne, a lot of what we talked about in this series is the whole topic of trust, and
yeah,
you know, yes, we know that even the idea of coming up with a detailed project plan is fruitless, but product roadmaps that are driving the activity of the team or the team of teams, that's absolutely invaluable, because by giving small incremental deliveries that again, to John's point, all the agile principles, by having them with us as we're producing production units of value, we aren't asking them to just trust us, in 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, whatever, we're going to have this big thing, it's going to be awesome. That is so unreasonable. I mean, and truly, even if you had that level of trust within an organization, you're not doing that relationship any good by having such a high risk proposition. To say nothing of the learning cycles that we missed by not getting it out there every couple of weeks, or honestly, more than that. We look at what the Dora reports tell us. The very best of the best organizations at delivering value are releasing small units of production work crazy frequently, way more than once a day, and therefore think about how much they can learn again to reduce variability.
And that's it's a good wrap on this conversation. Is the mindset, the direction for the thinking is critical. Understanding what variability is, it's missing data, it's missing information, it's things that we don't yet know. And if we wanted to spend the detailed time to learn it, it's theoretically possible. Probably not realistic yet, but we're getting there with all the digital modeling and twins and so forth. The problem is we miss the opportunity while we're trying to gather all that detailed data. Let's just go learn really quickly by doing, by implementing, by trying different opportunities. I'm reminded of that Nicolas Cage movie. I forget the title. He could see 3 seconds into the future. And so he would have a multiple scenario. We would quickly go this direction, this, and where's the bad guy type of thing? What's going to be the best outcome? That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about going for months and years type of thing. It's the equivalent of that 3-second think into the future. Boom, boom, boom. Try this. Wow, that's really good option. Let's push that a little farther. Now let's do our same 3 seconds there. That's what we're talking about is these quick, as you said, the smaller batch sizes. Those small little iterations of product increments are invaluable. They don't necessarily move the product forward. They move the knowledge forward. We might actually regress from that and say, wow, that taught us a lot. Back to here, let's try it this way then. And now we're reinforced with that data we gathered there. So, all right, good conversation, guys. Thanks. By the way, for those listening, John has been sending in chat some different options for the name for this podcast, which we're still working on, of course, because this is absolutely not politically correct. I have to call them out. So its first one was Three Idiots with Hot Mics, resemble that remark. Now he's going with Three Crazy Lean Folks with Hot Mics. So let us know what you think. Maybe it's some semblance of that. What's that, Dan?
Iterating towards better.
Yes, iterating towards better. Absolutely. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll talk soon.
See you.